So I would like to ask the distinguished speakers to answer to my call so that you become visible with name and face to the audience. I will start by calling Caroline Nijland. An applause for her. I will call Suzanne Nice from Euroelectrics. Lieven Kennis from Siemens. Bernard Wagman, a professor for the University of Neuholm. I would call Molly Ward, US State Department. Molly, you are most welcome. Christian de Grosmat, de l'Agence Française. And Jens Drillich from KfW. I hope to have not missed anybody. So, as I said, you, distinguished speakers, you have the privilege to be in the only panel where I don't ask you to work. And we would like to hear from you experiences, successful business models, problems, opportunities, and threats. It is, for me, very important, this session, because it will be sort of the palette of colors where we will see the different tonalities of the business of electrification. And within this palette of colors, then we will go and identify which tonality we shall go for this initiative that we are launching immediately after lunch. We have, in practical terms, a session that goes from now to our lunch, which is a couple of hours. So we will have presentations, and we will have a debate. I would suggest all of you to take notes of questions, challenges that you want to pose, difficult, nasty questions that you want to pose to our speakers, and then we will launch the session as soon as the presentations are through, in order to have your questions answered, if possible. I would invite my colleagues to take notes of what is being said here, for inasmuch this will be relevant to our business, which is to make electrify working and sustainable. I didn't spell out clearly what is at stake. We will start this Electrify proposal from the thematic budget line of the European Commission with 75 million. It will comprise, of course, technical assistance in the due proportion. It will comprise finance in the due proportion. But the actor is the entrepreneur, local entrepreneur combined with foreign entrepreneur, and the actor will blend then for resources, money, and human skills with also the civic society. But also local authorities are very important, because very, very often they know the community in a very competent and valid way. Now, I call the first presentation. So the 75 million will then grow through regional allocations. We have regional programs, and in all of them there are regional allocations for energy. The 3.5 billion that were mentioned by Christopher Jones, they come from intra-ACP money. This is for EDF. Regional allocations in Africa, but also in Latin America, Central America, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. And these regional allocations will converge to form the bulk of Electrify. So Electrify will start with 75 million, but then will grow with the years from EC financing. And as I said, the purpose is to target that market of electrification where the market is failing, that section of the rural electrification where the market is failing. It's an honor and privilege for me to call a presentation of a successful business model for rural electrification in Africa by Caroline Nijand of FRES Area Board Member. A round of applause, please.
Dear colleagues, let me first let you know that I'm really proud working in the sector of rural electrification since 15 years. I was nearly born in Africa. I was born in the Netherlands, but living a long time in Cameroon. We are talking about the 70s and the 80s, and I was also living in the 90s in Africa. And since 15 years, traveling throughout Africa, in rural areas, and I see that really a lot of efforts have been made in reaching energy access. Although it's on a small scale, but a lot have been made, and but we still have a lot to do. And not only FRES, but there are a lot of operators who are not here in this room, because I know a lot of other operators who are also working hard in Africa or Asia and other countries. But we have to scale and accelerate the objective of energy access. And that's what we are trying with at least also our activities. Secondly, I would like, as a board member of the Alliance of Rural Electrification, also emphasizes the need of this business association. The Alliance of Rural Electrification is the only global business association in the world focusing on the promotion of off-grid renewable energy solutions for rural electrification in developing countries. We are committed to serve the European Commission agenda on energy for development, as well as the post-2015 agenda, to disseminate cost-effective and sustainable renewable energy solutions in developing markets. Please, for the ones who are here and who are not yet members, please join us. Look on the website. There are a lot of people here who are all members already of the Alliance of Rural Electrification. Please grasp us and ask us questions, and try to join us, because we need more members to be stronger and to realize more energy access. Introducing FRES. Let me first say something about FRES. I know some of you already know FRES, and it's not the first time I'm presenting about the foundation, but in general, our mission of the Foundation Rural Energy Service in the Netherlands is to provide electricity to rural off-grid areas in developing countries. We use solar energy for that purpose. We have a multinational network of FRES companies in Africa, in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Uganda, and South Africa. They are commercial utilities. These companies are commercial small-scale utility companies, and they have a sustainable approach. And we focus on households, small enterprises, and public buildings. The FRES business model, because this is the core of our activity. We are working on the basis of fee-for-service business model, and that means that the customers, the households, the small enterprises, the public buildings, they pay for the use of the solar home system or being connected to the mini-grid. They pay a monthly fee depending. The level is depending on the service level they choose for, depending on the number of appliances they have in-house or the number of lights or electricity requirements they need. On the other side, our companies remain the ownership of the systems. And our companies, they install, maintain, and repair the systems. The tariff we are using, we are applying in the field depends also on the countries. So they differ between €6 and €20 per month. Let's say in West African countries, the tariffs are lower than in East African countries. And it depends also on the energy service level the customers choose for. This is just to give you a summary of the achievements to date of the foundation. We have reached, our companies employ by the end of 2013, 230 direct staff and 266 indirect staff. And that's, we are in the rural areas where we are operating, we are seen as major employers. And that's also important to say. We are not only providing energy access, but also providing employment. And especially with mini-grids, we need also a lot of local material and local supplies to make it possible. We have reached, at the end of 2013, we have connected nearly a little bit more than 30,000 households, small businesses, and public buildings. The first customer evolution, you can see here that since the start of our companies, we started in 2001 with, in Mali and in South Africa. You see that till 2005, we reached 12,000 households and small businesses which were connected. Then you see a stable line between 2005 and 2008-09. We had some troubles in finding financial means, and we couldn't connect more clients. So we were working hard to search for more partnerships. And in 2008, we find some partnerships, for example, with the government of the Netherlands and Nuon in a public-private partnership. And from that moment, we could connect more clients. And from that moment, when we find more financial means, it was easy also to find even more financial means. Well, our objective is to reach, at the end of this year, 40, let's say nearly 40,000 customers. When I say customers, I mean households and small enterprises. And well, we hope before 2020, 2025, 30, we hope to connect 100,000 customers. Well, just to say something about the key technologies we are using, the core business, the core product we are using is solar home system. And that's in most of the countries. The capacity differs between 80 and 320 watt peak. And we use them especially in remote areas. And then in Mali, we have a specific situation. In Mali, we have also mini-grids and solar home system, but most of the clients are also connected to mini-grids. We have 3 solar mini-grids, 6 hybrid mini-grids, 1 diesel-only mini-grid operational in Mali since 2008, 2010 and 2012. Till now, we have connected 4,000 mini-grid customers per August 2014. The capacity of our mini-grids is between 50 kilowatt peak and 150 kilowatt peak. Tariffs is an important matter also in our operational work. Because we always have to, especially for mini-grid operations, we always have to balance between the commercial and social drivers. For example, in Mali, we need a certain level of tariff, and we have to negotiate it. I think 30% of my time I use to lobby with governments to get at least suitable tariffs to be able to operate in a commercial manner. But yeah, in Mali you can also have villages where the people revolt and people lobby a lot to decrease the tariffs and to keep the tariffs as low as possible as in the urban areas. So we always have to find an equilibrium between the commercial and social equilibrium for tariffs. And that's a challenge, working every week on that, and still remain a big challenge. Of course, we work a lot with government, and we apply to the regulations of the countries. Just to give you an idea, well, I already said the monthly fees, depending on the countries, the situation where we are in the countries, but the monthly fees varies between €6 and €20 per month. And these tariff levels are affordable. We always do a lot of studies before we settle the tariffs. And these tariffs are equivalent to what they used to pay before for traditional expenses, for traditional energy expenses, or even lower. The mini-grid tariff is 0.38 eurocent per kilowatt hour. Just to show you the capacity we are providing in each country, so it varies between, at this moment, we were higher, but we had to, in some countries, we had to decrease it also, but we are between 160, 170, and 60 watt peak per system. So we are providing not only electricity, only light, but also for providing electricity for appliances. I have to go faster. Just to give you an idea, Nura, South Africa is one of the companies we have since a long time. We are working together with a lot with the Ministry of Energy, Department of Energy, and it's the biggest company we have with nearly 20,000 customers. Yelenkura in Mali is the second company which is established also in 2001, and we are working together also with a lot with the government of Mali. This was the last inauguration ceremony grid, mini-grid in last summer in the presence of the Prime Minister of Mali. Yelenba is the third company. We are working, we have nearly 2,500 customers. We had some troubles and issues starting in this country because it was difficult to find the right management, and starting also working with the government took some time. Also with local authorities took also some time, so we had some troubles, and you can see that also in the evolution of customers. Then Fresh Uganda is the fourth country, strong cooperation with the Ministry of Energy and Rural Electrification Energy. And in this country, in this area where we are operating, 50% of our customers are small enterprises. And that's quite unique. We don't see that in the other countries where we are operating. And that's why they have the biggest systems, capacity systems in this country, well, in our operation. Fresh Guinea-Bissau is the last country where we started in 2001. Good customer evolution, really going very well. People are paying and demanding also are also asking for high demand for larger systems. Just to show you that we have an average, about the mini-grids, we have an average increase of 70% annual over 9 years. Just to show you the increase in in energy consumption. This is just to show you some success factor: commercial, sustainable, replicable approach, affordable and sustainable tariff structures. We are strong in maintenance and replacement, strong governance model, a strict monitoring of performance of the companies is really important. I'm also board member in all these companies, and we work every day hard on that. Procurement policy, we centralize it at FRES in the Netherlands to make gains from bulk purchasing, and we have a tendering strategy also. Local ownership, also important, so that the companies feel that they have to do the work and we just support them when needed. Strong partnership, we are strong in finding the means. Of the 36 million we invested till 2013, 12 million was from private funds, and 21 million approximately was from subsidies. So we were also strong in not only getting subsidies, but also private funds from companies like Alliander, Nuon, and other companies. We work a lot with Alliander on the grid network problems we had. We have a lot of kind support from organizations in the Netherlands for free advice. The challenges are, still, if you want to scale and accelerate energy access, you need more financing. So I'm really hoping that we can discuss on the new proposal from the EU for electrification financing instrument that we will discuss today. But don't forget the operational issues we have, tariff negotiations, non-payment, really important. You can never have sustainable companies if the non-payment is high. So payment recovery, really, really important. We are working every day on that and monitoring that. The managing growth in demand in consumption, also important. To find qualified staff in rural setting, not easy at all. Finding people in cities, yes, but finding them to work in rural areas, that's quite difficult. But we manage that. Of course, some more efforts need to mitigate risk related to regulation, economy, fiscal and policy issue, and that's important. So not only finding the right financing mechanism, but also find solutions for all the issues we are daily faced to. That's important. Next steps, we will set up a company in Cameroon next year. We will start mini-grid operations in Guinea-Bissau. Continuous focus on financial sustainability, organization of technical and economical mini-grid performance, and for its impact, I'm sorry, I have to skip over this. Yes, and these are the partners we are working with, and we need more and more, but we are really happy to have already these partners to make energy access possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to be rude, but we have to give everybody the same time, and the time is 12 minutes. You have taken 20, but please sit down. And it is important. I think you have given a very useful contribution to our discussion today. Not only finance, but also tariff, non-payment, managing growth. This is very important driving force for companies, staff availability of technology to enforce payment. I think these are all valid items. The presence of the European Union in each and every country, I hope that has been useful for you. Certainly when I was ambassador, that was part of my duties to assist the development of actions on the ground. So negotiations, for example, on tariffs or negotiations on licensing. This is an important part of our job. I would like to thank you, but now I have to invite the next speakers to stick. At 10 minutes, I will make some waving to you. That means that you have 2 minutes left, and I hope that now we can keep the time. Thank you very much. Now, I call Susan Nies, Head of Unit for Eurelectric, the Association of Energy Utilities in Europe.
Many thanks, Mr. Ridolfi. Women's solidarity obliges. I will try to make up for the time difference and we'll do it in 6 minutes in order to catch up. I need to understand how this works. Okay. First of all, I think choosing rural electrification as a topic is extremely wise. 70% of people living in cities avoiding that it's 100% one day definitely makes sense to use rural electrification as a target, and I congratulate our partners ARE and the Commission to choose this topic. And even more so, we have seen in Africa, in particular, telecoms have been rolled out via mobile phones without using the usual grids and infrastructure. Why shouldn't we see the same going on for electrification in these areas where high voltage lines are limited today to major places? So we congratulate you with this. I'm not going to go into any detailed projects here. Is our members, which is EDP, Enel, very active in access to energy, going to share their experience. Let me share a little bit the general thoughts about the private sector perspective, which has not yet been presented. The proposal to be improved, as Mr. Ridolfi said, yes, that's our ambition. And also I would like to congratulate Mr. Ridolfi, who is known as a very active, forward-looking person with the pricey one for the Bloomberg New Energy Finance for good leverage. It's not a question of humanitarian support, no, it's a question of leverage, and the private sector is there to help you make it happen. So Eurelectric, briefly, we are the pan-European and internationally oriented association of the European power sector. Something like 90% of the European power sector is here. We also have countries like Russia, I shouldn't say that today, maybe too much, but we have Ukraine, we are working in Southeast Europe and many other countries. And we have been signing up to a charter for access to energy last year with our president, then Fulvio Conti. Mr. Starace is as well committed to this, where we say this industry has to take responsibility, this industry has to work with NGO, this industry has to work with the regulators on making it happen, 500 million people by 2030. We are part of the story. We have many examples already of our companies in the field, but we should use their experience for best practice, for exchange. Here's some of the projects, Enel, GDF, and others, EDF was mentioned already, stand for this. We are engaged in renewables as well, indeed, in developing countries, but I would also, listening to Mr. Adnan and others, renewables is maybe 70% of the solution. It is not the solution. I'm German myself, and in the current discussion in German energy policy, we see there's a shift to energy efficiency, to smart services, smart energy, and renewables, again, is part of the story. It's not the story. Let's not forget about this. Here's the examples. In order to make up for my 6 minutes, I will go very fast. The stakeholders are here to say that. But we are extremely concerned when it comes to these projects with the current obstacles to getting there, and these obstacles include ourselves. Concerning the regulatory and political instability, and as someone who knows especially Southeast Europe quite well, we see that the legal frameworks for protection of investment, the regulatory uncertainty, non-functioning regulators are today a main obstacle, and we encourage the Commission to work on this together with us. Infrastructure is missing, local experts are missing, education is missing, the construction times are long, bureaucracy is high. This needs to change. Financial barriers hopefully will be addressed with such initiative as Electrify. And internally, with respect to ourselves, I have to say as well that we also need to change, and we definitely, and there's a request to NGOs, you need to shift from a humanitarian-only approach to more business. I know from experience that this is not always a given, and there's some religious fights with respect to business, seeing them as neo-colonial partners rather than true partners. You need to shape us, and we need to shape you. We need to have the right technical, financial, and regulatory framework in place. This includes technical, financial, and regulatory change as fast as possible. Public and private have to go hand in hand. In addition, the NGOs, which, as I know, are on a changing track, they need to focus on sustainable business models. My colleague from EDP is going to explain you later on worst practice as well in a project where they have seen that humanitarian support has destroyed one of their promising projects in the refugee camp Kakuma. Don't focus on charity alone. And we as Eurelectric, what are we doing? We are combining the efforts of our members, and we're gathering more members, which is the companies, which is the European power sector, to support the European Commission and the NGOs on making this happen. We would like to see for this that the DG DevCo, beyond financial instruments and beyond specific initiatives, would set up a clear roadmap where we would find our place. We would like to see as well something like a marketplace emerge on the website of DG DevCo, where NGOs, regulatory authorities, as well as private sector could match and go hand in hand. Many, many promising initiatives are there, but they should match much better. Electrify, there will be more comments later on, but it should reflect as well how private, NGO, and the regulators work together on this. Many thanks for your attention.
What can I say? The only word is thank you. Thank you. She has kept the 7 minutes she promised, so well done. Thank you again. I think we have all noted down few keywords. I don't know if you share with me, but I noted down integration of mini grids into main grids, because when we start with mini grids later on, and these are utilities managed. The tariffs, again, energy demand is low. I noted that in one of your slides, but I think we are here to make such that energy demand will be even bigger than what it is. There are forecasts that energy consumption in Africa in the next 20 years will be something vertical. So I think that in order to have a good business perspective and growth for a number of companies, Africa is certainly a very good place to go. No CSR, but business models. I think we can't agree more on this. CSR is an important part of business, but business, real business, is better than the CSR part of it. I think we do believe that a real business model that works will deliver and will sustain the growth of the delivering. This is very important. By bringing a private operators in a scheme, you don't only connect the 1,000, but you manage the growth of that 1,000 into 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, and so forth. And only private operators, profit-minded, I would say, is there for that. Certainly, we need social mechanism. We need to take care of tariffs. We need to take care of solidarity mechanism. Beyond financial issues, you mentioned, indeed, the regulatory environment is important. Now, for the clear roadmap, there are representatives of member states here. I would also solicit them to come up with a sort of request. In our humble opinion, as services of Europaid, we would like to set up a strategy for energy next year, 2015. And the strategy is normally something that we discuss, we elaborate, like a little bit the private sector role in development. That was a document that we discussed at length. We presented to the different groups and to the different formations, and then eventually became a roadmap. So I think 2015 is calling us on that, but I invite the member states also to be partie prenante and ask for this. Now, it's my privilege to call upon at the podium Lieven Kennis, the representative from Siemens.
So, thank you first of all for the audience to listen to us being the experts. Honestly, I believe that the experts are all amongst us, but still we do have some experiences, and we're also from the private sector. So Siemens, I think, is a very well-known company, is active in the power generation until the distribution in the rural areas. And as such, we do have some expertise. And the short presentation we will give here today is just one example of our experiences, and I really hope it will match to the challenges that Electrify wants to undo with the message we want to bring. So, what do we see in the development of projects? And as a technology company, we're always solicited early in the beginning because they have a technical challenge and they want a solution. And we see three phases. It's identification of the projects, is the evaluation of the projects and then the development to a real-life business case. And it started already with the identification of the projects. As said before in the introduction speech, there are a very small number of huge projects. And of course, everyone wants to do these. Also from a company point of view, everyone wants to be part of the big Inga tree when it comes in hopefully some years. And the big interconnection projects, these are the projects which are very visible. But if you're just walking around in the cities, but also in the rural areas, you see that we need not a small number of huge projects, but with a huge number of small projects. And then it becomes difficult. The identification of these projects from a technology provider is very expensive. We want to go there, but the return on investment for traveling to the continents, either in Latin America or Africa, in Southeast Asia, the return on investment is only valuable the moment there is a big project behind. So this is already one of the topics which is sometimes limiting the viability of the projects. In the identification, there was another approach, and we have a project which is quite successful at this stage. It's a project together with the UNEP and IRENA on the identification of a business case in the off-grid connections within hybrid microgrids. Actually, it's a combination of renewable energy and the classical diesel-fired power generation, but to see if these projects are viable. So this project, at this stage, you can see is between phase 1 and phase 2, is we identified all over the world at least 8 projects for which we believe and have identified a positive business case. So this is already step 1. We have projects and we know, not from a vendor point of view, but from a business point of view, that these projects are viable, that they have a positive return on investment. But then we still have a problem. And the next steps, again, there is a lot of demand towards the private investors or the technology company to go in and go for a complete detailed feasibility study because the risks are too high. There's also the need to have also detailed business plans. It's not the role of a technology provider to develop these things. We can do this and we want to do this, but if you see it on a global scale, we do not do this for a project of 1 to 2, 3 million. This is, on the balance, not efficient. And of course, everyone is there to have a return. So this is already where we can see that a program from the European Commission could help to make the bridge between this phase 1, where we proved the existence of the business cases, and the phase 2, to make it also interesting for the investors. Because really we believe that the key role in these projects are the local entrepreneurs. And if you're walking around in different cities or on fairs or whatever, you meet people from the first world and the developing world, they come to you with projects, they have ideas, they want to invest. And the entrepreneurs are there, the technology is there, but then we need the money. And again, for the smaller project, it's very difficult to find a bank which is not asking for a return on equity of more than 40%. A lot of these projects with a viable business case, when we just think about a reasonable return on equity, die on the calculating table the moment you ask too high returns on equity. So, as a summary, so first of all, the identification of these projects, we need some help. And also on the next step, and the realization and the calculation, we can help some. We can have some help, because finally, and this is what we want to take as a summary. We really hope that with the Electrify, that the 3 key messages that we heard this morning could be possible. That we make the projects viable. This is what a good qualification and also a good startup equity to do this. To attract more investors, both local entrepreneurs and also local investors which come in with capital. And at the end, to bring in the private sector, being utilities, being it technology companies, to make this together a success. So, I thank you for your time, and I have questions maybe at the end of the presentation.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Kenis. Yes, indeed, risky project, small, to be developed. Identification is a cost, is a risky business in itself. Realistic expectation on equity, because these projects, and that's where I think Electrify is filling that gap. Capital costs very high, and the mix of different companies, utilities, technology, donors, civic society, local authorities. I insist and I repeat, there are a lot of leaders from a number of partner countries here. I hope that you will then raise your voice in due course of today and tomorrow, so that we really understand what is expectations on the other side. And I think the message that is coming across very, very often through the presentations is the need of a regulatory environment that is really conducive to investments. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to call upon Professor Bernard Wagman, Director of the Center for Corporate Management, University of New Ulm. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm still waiting for my slides. To the technician, please.
Can we assist? Hello?
The slides for speaker number 4, please. Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, at first I would like to introduce myself. I'm professor at the University of Applied Science in Neu-Ulm, Germany. Internationally oriented business school, and I'm one of the 2 directors of the Institute for Decentralized Electrification, Entrepreneurship and Education. And I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you some selected results of our risk mitigation study. The study has been taken out by a team at our university and was supported by the ARE, the Alliance for Rural Electrification, and the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. Okay, now, these are the topics I'm going to speak on. Shortly on the background about risk management, derived key recommendations and comments on Electrify. First of all, what were the objectives of the study? The study was a kind of self-analysis of the industry taken out by our team, and we worked with standardized and not standardized interviews altogether with 15 ARE member companies worldwide. Yeah. And the objective was to see how our companies in the industry of rural electrification working with risk management, what is well done, where might be deficits, and which recommendations can be derived. In the target groups, yeah, you see it was, of course, for the industry itself, for newcomers, and also, of course, for bankers and financial institutions, because very typical, there is a kind of language gap between the practitioners and these high sophisticated financial people who speak another language and have another view at things. Here, a very simple diagram which illustrates at first that we have focused on mini-grids according to the assignment got by ARE and GIZ. And secondly, it shows our understanding of the mini-grid as a kind of enterprise. An enterprise, public or private, profit or non-profit, which delivers energy for a restricted area, for a village or a settlement, and within a rural situation where the ability and willingness to pay is rather low. Yeah? And you see here the upper part are the systems and technology. And as already Mr. Amin from IRENA said this morning, the technology is very far developed. The technology, of course, is not the system. Of course, there are certain problems for the installation and all the things to be paid attention for. But the real problems usually come from the lower part, from finance and cost control, from sales and public relations, from regulations and all the things which have to be taken into regard. And you see here a classical conflicts of interests between the investors' expectations on the interest rate for equity and debt, and the customer expectations to have a social acceptable tariff, even maybe lower than the national grid tariff. And when in the country the national grid tariff is low, then the question is, how can this function? Yeah? So I have sympathy for the new approach of Electrify, but the question will be, is the market still mature enough to have private money being and flowing into such enterprises which are still rather risky and don't deliver big profits? Yeah? Because as one from the ADB said on a beer meeting, we need these systems urgently, but nearly none of them does work properly. And this is not the cause by the systems or the technology. The engineers usually do a wonderful work, but the difficulties come from the lower part. It's a little bit like an iceberg. Yeah? The danger is below the red line. Okay, risk management and risk assessment. We have asked the companies how they range the risk in such a risk matrix positioned between loss potential and probability of occurrence. And then you see that 3 risks in the red area in the right-hand corner are of special importance. The political risk, payment risk, and risk of resource price variability. Yeah, the political risk is hard to be influenced by managerial instruments. Yeah? And the risk of resource price variability overall is a problem for systems working on biomass or also on diesel. Yeah? Here, for time reason, and because it's directly related to operational risk, I would like to concentrate on the payment risk. Yeah? Where does the payment risk come from? It can come from conflicts, because customers are not satisfied with the service coming from the mini-grid, or it may be caused by lacking willingness to pay, ability to pay because of financial restrictions. Okay, let's step further. What we, in conclusion, derived from all the data which we received. And I would like to say once more, this is just a very, very selected summary. If you want to know more, you can have our summary, which is printed out and is available at the desk of ARE, or you just ask me. Yeah, I'm easy to recognize because of the fly. That's the reason why I have it. And you can have the whole study, which is in progress. And if you just give me your business card, and I will send you the link. Next item, key recommendation. The first hits directly the question of, can mini-grids be holistic in sense of viability and in sense of sustainability? Yeah? And here, if you have a short glance on these items, you see that there are a lot of risks which can be classified in two categories: risks which are more or less socio-culturally related, and risks which are more or less economically related. Yeah? And now I have put this here into a system, and let's start here in the lower left corner, yeah, with the activity package 1. Proper systems and proper installation of these systems. This is what our colleague from Siemens just presented, and it's a really good thing to do, and it needs a lot of qualification. But when it is installed and is going to operate, then the other packages are of need. The social cultural integration, which is mainly dealing with capacity training, capacity building and training. We heard about the difficulty speaking about having staff which is really qualified. This package is speaking about stakeholder involvement, and last and least of the monitoring and control of these mini-grids, especially when they are handed over to local operators who don't have a very long experience with doing this. The other package is here, package 3 in the lower right corner, the economic integration. This is a question: how many people have the money to pay for electricity? Are there entrepreneurs which use the cheap energy produced by photovoltaic during the day? And if not, there should be taken the initiative to attract commercial customers, to attract entrepreneurs, and to convince them to use energy electrification to enlarge their business and to increase their efficiency and effectiveness. Because then you have a certain reliability of electricity sales with the cheap produced energy of the day. Yeah? For the night, working with solar, you need all the expensive batteries, and it is very hard to reach the break-even if you don't have these commercial customers.
2 minutes.
Package 2 and 3 together then would be the holistic concept. Need for a standardized risk management procedure. We asked our interview partners about the risk management tools they use usually. And you see here the 3 most important risk tools: risk audit, risk maps, cash flow at risk. And in the right column, you see that usually they are rarely used, except perhaps the last line. Yeah? The question is, what is the cause behind of this? It is, as we could prove, a lack of familiarity with these tools, yeah? Time pressure, the lack of having appropriate checklists and tools which have an industry-related focus, yeah? Which are easy to work with. And so our proposal is that together with Irina and others, we start to discuss and to work out a standardized risk procedure, which includes easy-to-handle tools and which is also accepted by financial institutions and which is able to close the language gap between practitioners and financial institutions. More could be presented, but I'm out of my time, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, indeed, you went out of your time, but you did say interesting things. So, high sophisticated language of financial people. That's a funny way to say the jargon used by these nerds on financial terms. Customer-investor conflict of interest is not the same conflict of interest I have when I go to a shop and buy something. I would like to buy less, and they put up the prices. But indeed, for our business, it's particularly important. I understand what you say. In a way, for us, it's a question of pulling this financing up and therefore hedging the risk. So we do welcome this idea of an industry-specific standardized risk procedure that, if triggered by the ARE people and also by the financial institutions together, setting up a tool that is recognized as a certification of risk on one side, and it is inspiring also equity investment on the other. When you certainly say the risk matrix, everyone has looked at the red zone: political risk, payment risk, and resource price variability. I think the political risk and the resource price variability is a question that is really within the regulatory environment. The payment risk today and tomorrow will never be away from the entrepreneur, be it a public or private, because if we remove that, then you tell me what is stays of the entrepreneurship. But the other two are very much part of the political dialogue. And political dialogue we do have as European Union. With all the ambassadors of the member states, the European Union ambassador is very, very often in political dialogue with the host government. And that's where the political risk must be hedged. That's where the regulatory environment becomes conducive or not. That's the reason why last week in New York, 5 joint declarations committing mutually to a win-win approach were signed between the EU, President Barroso, as was mentioned in the beginning, and leaders of 5 countries, committing to do more for more. And this more is hedging the political risk, is making an environment which is more conducive. So we are now to the next speaker, Miss Molly Ward. She is from the Alternative and Renewable Energy Advisor in the Bureau of Energy Resources of the US State Department. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Molly Ward, Alternative and Renewable Energy Advisor at the US Department of State. And I will be presenting on actually specific financial structure or model that we have seen in Bangladesh through our Sustainable Energy for All country action work. And I'm using this model as an example that could be replicated in other countries. So to give an overview of how we came to know about this model and our work so far through the SE for All initiative. So the US Department of State has led the efforts in country action in Bangladesh, but we have been very closely partnering with the government of Bangladesh, as well as the World Bank, Asia Development Bank, UNDP, German government, as well as many other entities. One of the reasons we've been very successful in our work there is that the public and private sectors in Bangladesh are both very, very active and engaged in this initiative, and they work very well together. We are focusing on all 3 objective areas of the SE for All initiative. So this includes electricity access, clean cooking fuels, as well as energy efficiency and renewable energy. To date, we have had 4 missions to the country And through these missions, we have produced a number of documents, an aid memoir, an investment prospectus framework, which set the stage for what we are now drafting, an investment prospectus, which is essentially a portfolio of viable, bankable projects within these 4 focal areas. Our next plans are, at the end of October, we are gearing up for an investor forum, which will be an opportunity to highlight specific projects. Companies submitted, we had approximately 20 project proposals that were submitted to us by companies in Bangladesh, and we selected a subset of those that are really ready to present to investors now. So at the end of October, these companies will be making their pitches to various investors. A primary reason why we've been so successful to date in moving ahead in the SE for All initiative in Bangladesh is because of this institution called IDCOL, the Infrastructure Development Company Limited. So I, by no means, am an expert on IDCOL, and I also do not represent the institution. I merely am using it as an example to highlight why we have been successful through our SE for All country action efforts, and that this is a model that I think others in other regions could use and understand and hopefully learn from. So IDCOL, the Infrastructure Development Company Limited, to date has installed over 3 million solar home systems, and they're installing them at a rate of approximately 70,000 per month. They have built 36,000 biogas digesters, 38 solar pumps are in operation, with 150 approved and 1,500 more targeted. And they have targeted 1 million cook stoves by 2017. Without going through all of this in too much detail, this is just a broad overview of the structure of IDCOL and how it operates. It is a government-owned but independently operated non-bank financial institution. And what makes it very unique is that while it is owned by the government, it sits outside of the government and is operated by a separate entity. It provides funding for both infrastructure projects as well as for off-grid renewable energy projects. And what I'm going to focus on is the off-grid renewable project component of IDCOL. The objective of the model is to create a market in off-grid areas for renewable energy and to provide both supplier and end user credit. The renewable energy program within IDCOL was established in 2002, and it was initially set up by through a grant and a loan provided by the World Bank and the Global Environment Facility. As the program developed a track record and grew, additional funds started to flow into it from the World Bank, ADB, USAID, KfW, among others. The general structure of IDCOL is that companies would apply to become partner organizations of this institution. And these companies have to have some sort of expertise in renewable energy and microcredit. There's a separate technical standards committee which sits outside of the institution, and they set the technical standards for the technologies and the components, and they review the companies and help to determine which companies will qualify as a partner organization. IDCOL also enforces quality control on the various technologies, and it monitors the partner organization's financial performance. One critical element why this has been successful is that the government has been very supportive of this, and they have been providing policy support, such as removal of barriers on tariffs. The IDCOL model initially started off, the renewable energy side, focusing on just solar home systems, and then it expanded to include other technologies such as mini-grid systems and solar irrigation. It also initially, the partner organizations were initially just NGOs, and then later on, as it gained this track record, it moved into allowing private sector companies to apply. The partner organizations are responsible for developing the projects, identifying which areas they will operate, selecting their potential customer base, providing the loans, installing the systems, providing after-service sales. IDCOL financially supports these partner organizations with both long-term loans on concessional terms as well as a variety of grants. Over time, the idea is that IDCOL would slowly remove its grant funding from these POs. So as they gain their track record and as they become more comfortable in this space and are recognized, then the grants are removed. So it's really to build the market in the off-grid area so that a company would no longer be in need of IDCOL to provide electricity. I'm not going to go through all of these components, but this just demonstrates the fund flow and the role the various partners take in the model, starting off with the multilateral development agencies, going to the government of Bangladesh, then to IDCOL, then to the partner organizations, and then ending at the households through loans and grants. And then the repayment is made through debt service. And so this highlights the various roles and steps that each of those entities takes. This is an overview of the program progress thus far, specific to solar home systems. So as you can see, they've really been ramping up with their solar home system installments, and they have a target of installing 6 million solar home systems by the end of 2017. So IDCOL has been widely recognized by many other countries as being very successful, and people are now trying to determine ways that it could be replicated and brought elsewhere. So while every market has its own unique structure, there are critical elements that are necessary in order to replicate a model like IDCOL. There needs to exist a technical and financially independent operating institution, so one that perhaps is owned by the government, but yet is independently operated and sits outside of the government. There needs to be both NGOs and private companies that have solid microcredit experience. In the IDCOL model, many of the companies actually didn't have the renewable energy expertise. They started off with the microcredit expertise, and then they gained that renewable energy understanding. There needs to be adequate donor agency grant support. So as the World Bank and Jeff provided this initial grant and loan funding to start up the initiative, and the loans need to have concessional terms. There needs to be very strict quality control of the products and the services of the partner organizations who are joining and becoming members of IDCOL. There needs to be very active government support in ways such as removing barriers on tariffs that might be applied to specific renewable energy technology components. And the system itself needs to be very flexible. It shouldn't necessarily be a one-size-fits-all or focusing on any one specific technology. It should really be technology neutral within the renewable energy space, and also allow different modalities for finance as well as different types of partner organizations. Because of IDCOL's success, and a lot of other countries are now coming to them to determine ways that they could replicate this, IDCOL has established an international division purely to help other countries who want to replicate this model. While IDCOL and Electrification are different structures, there are common elements and lessons that can really be taken from both models. They both demonstrate that external support can be successful in building up the capacity and off-grid market for renewable energy development. They also both support multiple technologies, so they don't focus on that one-size-fits-all or any one specific technology type. They both show or rely on the private sector, so not just being a public sector run model. And this needs to include civil society, private companies, and financial institutions. There needs to be a variety of both Electrifi and IDCOL both have a variety of financial mechanisms and concessional support in order to demonstrate that it can be successful and can scale up. And then lastly, they both really rely on a highly lean, responsive management structure. So you really need a core institution that is competent and capable at running this and is very, very lean. So lastly, I'm just going to make a quick plug for an event that we are actually running in a couple weeks in Washington, D.C. It's a workshop on commercially viable mini-grid systems. And what this event is being co-hosted by the State Department, USAID, United Nations Foundation, and the World Bank. And what we're trying to do in this workshop is run it a little bit different than how some other mini-grid workshops have been run. We're focusing really on those companies that are already operating and then move beyond the basic pilot phase. So those who have demonstrated some sort of success in leading the way. And the idea is to understand what have made these mini-grid companies successful. What are the challenges and barriers that they ran into? How did they overcome them? What were technology challenges or financial challenges? So it's really going to be a best practices and lessons learned from those companies around the world who are already operating in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Well, we heard about this experience in Bangladesh, and we heard also about a workshop that will take place in Washington. So take good notes, send over to the workshop in Washington, and there will be 50% of the work done by then. Now, technology neutral. I think we must be technology neutral within our framework of renewable technologies, and because that is indeed the challenge of having all open platform. Electrify must be an open platform. You talk about a lean but responsive management structure. I am looking for no management structure at all. I'm looking for something as close as possible to market function. We know that we are in a situation where market is failing, but that doesn't mean to set up structures and companies. I think the experience is indeed valid, and when you say that government support is essential, I think everybody here agrees. And this is a message that is coming over and over from all presentations. Without host government support, it will be impossible for any investor to move into that. I think EDFIs, and I recognize the SecGen of EDFIs here in the room, we are looking at you as our microcredit finance institutions to spearhead the experiences. On one side, we elevate microfinance institution to finance something bigger and more sustainable. On the other side, we call the EDFIs to finance something smaller. So the two hands will touch to a common goal indeed. And that was an interesting presentation. Let me call upon the next speaker, who's Monsieur Christian de Gromard, de l'Agence Française pour le Développement.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. So there was a mistake in the title. It's not a credit line, it's more to speak on the business model. And as Ridolfi asked whether we have any model, I would just say as Socrates that the only thing I know is that I don't know about this. So let's try to understand it. Next. Is it all? Sorry. So I think I will go quickly. AFD it's a development bank like KfW or the World Bank. We are present in 90 countries, and the commitment is around 8 billion a year last year. Second thing is we have an energy strategy with 3 pillars: sustainable energy, energy access, and to secure energy, the security of energy. I would clearly just say that energy access and sustainable energy are 2 different pillars. We can see some links, but clearly it's not the same pillar. And maybe that in Africa, the major probably demand is coming from the security of a large system. With the growth of demand, with the cities' big progress, there is a big need of new networks, new grids, interconnection, more than energy access and more than renewable energy. So just to show our commitment, so that you can see that with the commitment last year, Africa remains the main priority with around 50% of commitment on the energy sector, which are around 1.5 billion a year. And let's see at the three axes, you can see that the major commitments are on sustainable energy, and with 60%, energy access is only 4%. So around 40 to 50 million euro a year of commitment. Why this so little amount? It's not because AFD, like most of the donors, does not want to invest on renewable energy, on rural electrification, but you don't find so many country, private sector ready to invest on this business. That's a clear understanding on this. So that's let us focus on the energy factor and electricity access. This is a very well-known figure which show what is the problem of energy access and electricity access, with a figure in 2011 and the figure in 2030 with a business as usual scenario. Clearly, the problem is in Africa, Eastern Asia, and India and the Indian and Pakistan and Bangladesh. You can see that with a business as usual scenario, the situation is getting worse in Africa. So to change the tendency is a real huge challenge. How to build the business model? This figure is just to show that you've got always, rural electrification is always a public construction where you need a public policy and a public authority. That was the case in France, in Germany, in US, in Russia, in China, in all the country, and we still think that it has to be the case in Africa. And we can see that, for instance, in Africa, where the rural electrification increase, it's definitely because you have institution, rules, and policy on this. That's an interesting graph which show the cost of electricity delivery in various conditions with the power. When you look at the two extremities, you've got the interconnect grid, where you have a grid, the cost is around 10 to 15 cents. On the opposite, you pay more than $10 per unit when you have no electricity. So the big challenge in between the two one. But you've got variable costs, which are going from half let's say 50 cents of euro to $1 to $2 per euro. So there are two problems. How to make this system coexist together, and that's not easy to say to one village or one city, is that you have to pay twice or three times more than your city, which is 40 kilometers. And same thing when you provide solar system, and it's exactly the case that we have in a few countries. The people say, I don't want solar system, I want true electricity. So if you are at 40 kilometers from the grid, there is no problem. If you are at 5 kilometers from the grid, then it's a real political challenge. So these dynamics are really to be taken into account when you deal with rural electrification. Another thing is on the balance model of rural electrification and all the system. I think you've got three levels of balance system. One is the very operational. It's to pay for the fuel, to pay for the common operation. The second one is if you have to pay back, for instance, battery or new groups or new electronic device. And the third one is the full cost recovery. Clearly, the private sector can probably take into the first and second level. When you reach the third level, it's far more difficult without any public financing. Let's have a few examples of projects that we have launched. This morning, the project of Morocco, which was a very interesting project. So we show that within 12 years about, the project Morocco goes from 20% electrification to nearly 95%. The investment has been more than 2 billion euros on these 12 years, and AFD have provided soft loans, very soft loans, on nearly 240 million euros on 5 loans. The other donors were KfW, JICA, IDB. So that's a very big project where there was some private company, mainly on solar system, with about 60,000 solar system which are still operated. But clearly the financing was mainly through public financing, through the state and then through the electric company. And also the second thing which is interesting is that there were limited amount of subsidy, in fact. The amount of subsidy was clearly to define the commercial and the institutional rule for this solar business. It took about 2 years to implement all the contract and to launch the project with 1.5 million technical assistance. But after that, that was the whole system which worked on its own. Next step. There is another project similar in Senegal, which is going on. So there have been also the similar type. The only difference is that the loans are passed through the government or the grant and given through subsidy to the Agence Rurale d'Electrification, Agence Sénégalaise d'Electrification Rurale. The company which answered to the bid, that was bids were ONE in the first case and EDF Matforce. It's clearly, we can say ONE is not really a private company, and EDF and Matforce are, private, but they are not really little, small companies. So that means that also if you want to have large project, you need company with a certain size. A very limited company have difficulty to borrow, have difficulty to give guarantee on the long term. So how to associate them is a real challenge. The other thing is that clearly there is a mix of grid electrification, where you've got a better economy, and mini grids and solar systems. So this combination is probably a good one to be seen. Another project is a hybrid system. There are a lot of discussion and willingness to work on hybrid system. So we are working on this project in Mauritania on this. I would say that hybrid system is a very good system to reduce the fuel cost and to get a better view of the cost. But I would say it's reduce the losses. Reducing the losses for Somelec does not mean that you make profits and profitable business. You still need some subsidies to finance this, except if the customer is ready to pay the tariff which was said about half a dollars per kilowatt, which is not in Mauritania and in most of the country, most of Africa, the people say, I have got the right to get the electricity at the same price than my neighbor in the cities. And the last system is a revolving fund, which is financed with a grant also from EU, an interesting revolving fund, and that shows that there is a real stake also for the connecting charge. And the connecting charge is the same problem, I would say, in rural and in urban areas. So that's going through the electricity company. So just a few words to conclude on this issue. There are some possibility to support the private sector and to involve the private sector in the operation, but nearly it has to be done in a probably public scheme, global, and that's the example of Morocco and Senegal, and that takes time to implement the project. In Morocco, I said 2 years. In Senegal, 5 to 6 years. So how the private can support this long time is a real issue. The other one is financial intermediation, where you can support private finance, the private financing of electricity generation. We have studied that sort of project with agro-industry in Cameroon. And the only thing is that when we finalized the project, there was another project who was going to electrify all the forests. So once you electrify with a grid, then there is no more isolated project, which is the case of a lot of small isolated areas where you've got diesel, but the first thing that the people want to do is to get the electricity from the grid. So we have to think of this dynamics. And the second thing which is important to say is that the industry is really ready to invest on power generation. They are not ready to invest on power distribution. So you need a second one who deal with the distribution. That's something. And the third one is a dedicated credit line, which is working in Cambodia, where we are financing. And in Cambodia, it's very interesting. There is some private investor there, but the only difference is that the tariffs are totally free, and the people pay more than $1. It's because of the war. They have no electricity. They know that the grid will not come very soon, so they are ready to pay for $1, and this is regulated by the regulator. So that's also this question of tariff is very important. So as I said, I don't have the model, but we are very ready to work on new model and try to define new model. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you made clear that energy access is different from sustainable energy. Well, we want to make it coincide in a sense that without access, we won't fulfill our mandate of poverty eradication. The big issue of tariffs, I think you mentioned right to electricity. This is interesting. We are promoting the right, human rights-based approach. The right to electricity is an important one, not yet agreed at global level. Certainly in Africa, we have 10% of access to electricity in rural areas compared to 25% in sub-Saharan Africa in global. That means that clearly the incremental cost of connections in peri-urban areas is much, much lower than the rural areas. But the scenario that you have mentioned, that actually the number of people with no access will increase in business as usual, justifies and your patience and your commitment all here in this room today. Public action is essential. We keep repeating it, but private action brings something also additional. I'm thinking that a private investor will see a number of streams of opportunities out of electrification that can fuel business development. You mentioned the 3 levels of reimbursement through the tariffs. The first one, the second, where probably there is private sector alone, but the third one, there is reinvestments, will need certainly public intervention. I think we agree pretty much on this scheme. And you also touched on something, and you were the first one this morning, on this called ABC model, where there is an industry, an operator. This could be an hospital, by the way. This could be an hospital in remote rural areas without a grid, as well as a factory, as well as a big plantation and agricultural setup. And that could be the trigger of an electrification that then goes to benefit other people around. This is indeed one of the points that will be explained to you in this afternoon at 2:30. Certainly, you mentioned distribution and generation. Everybody likes generation because you sell to one person and you get an invoice every month, and the water is running the turbine is filling your pocket. This is a very nice model. I think that unfortunately, we have to face hybrid solutions. As you mentioned, hybrid technologies. We have to look at hybrid solutions in rural areas where sometimes we need to have a generator that is also a distributor, and then later on this will be part of the smart grid. In Monrovia, we mentioned tariffs. In Monrovia, there were before the Ebola, certainly, diesel, even petrol, ran small generators, and the electricity was sold at $1.5 per kilowatt hour. So it is somebody's paying these figures, and therefore there is an opportunity there for all of us. Let me call now the last speaker. The last speaker of this morning is Jens Drillich, Deputy Head of Division of KfW. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Roberto, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And I think you already do a very good work. You said you're going to start working in the afternoon, but I think just listening to us is very hard work. And what can I say, a seventh in a row to add? I will briefly show you what we as KfW now, as a second financial nerd apart from AFD now speaking, I will briefly show you what we're doing in the field of energy access. And I'd like to mention, and we touched it very briefly in the morning, what is energy access and how can we improve energy access with the projects we are financing and others are financing. Then I briefly like to touch on 2 project examples and come up with some conclusions from my personal view. Well, what we're doing is, on behalf of the German government, and Kande mentioned, I think Germany has said that they will commit to provide access to a modern energy for additional 100 million people. And of course, we, on behalf of the German government, will support them. Just to come up with some numbers, we did so with the last year with our energy projects, and I think we've taken a conservative approach. We've reached about 1.5 million people. If you take a more common approach, and I come back to this a bit later on, you should say we have reached already 6 million people, so we're on a good track. Just if you take the conservative approach, I think with the remaining 16 years, there must be some more to be done to reach this 100 million. What we do is, apart from improving the access to electricity, of course, we're also engaging in access to modern cooking energy, especially in biogas and LPG. What we do, and we are very happy to do so, to work together with the team of the Global Tracking Framework of the SE4All initiative, with the colleagues from especially the World Bank, and also in this respect to give our input to this planned status energy access report, which is currently being developed. And then, as Molly has said, we are also supporting the German government in the role of as one of the priority partners or lead donors in Bangladesh. And I think the ITCOL example, which some of our colleagues are working as well, may really serve as one very good example, because it also combines this kind of subsidy issue we heard about in a very smart way. Something which hasn't been said today is that we're quite happy that the whole debate on energy access, which has come up for the last 3 years, really has shown that access is more than typical access projects. Let's take the example, for example, maybe in India and other countries, there are villages which are connected to the grid, but basically in no minute per year there's electricity flowing. So in the end, when you take up the definition of energy access to, or access to electricity, which is developed, we know that providing electricity, be it with improved energy efficiency in the grid, or be it with just some new generation, this may serve in improving access. So I would say, and this is a typical win-win situation we have, then we can reach the renewable energy target with having solar instead of diesel, but then also improving access. But the point is, when we come up with numbers, and we, as a financial institution, we have to report on commitments. When we say politically, we will report on, okay, we contributed X million people to this target of 500 million in the case of the EU, 100 million in the case of Germany. We have to think on the common methodology, and this is also one thing I think which has to be discussed within the Electrify initiative. How do you treat, for example, projects which are financed by 2 different organizations? Do those organizations claim 100% each? In certain cases, like in the climate debate, this is done. And I would say we have to be cautious in this approach. Skip to the next point. Our experiences, and I've picked up just 2 examples, one in Mozambique and one in Uganda. this was implemented a couple of years ago, and I've been there about last year. We can see, and we discussed this broadly, on the positive impact that can be achieved by providing lines, providing more access, and the low voltage distribution network. But, and we talked about before, really the challenge we see is that in many cases, and by definition, rural areas are defined by a very low density of demand. And we've heard this a couple of times but today, but the cost per kilowatt hour are really higher than in densely populated area. I think we can talk about it, but we won't change this fact. And the point is, we really have to make sure how is the development of this village or this region that we either connect to the grid or we construct a mini-grid. I think that's technology neutral. We really have to think that the demand has to rise so that at the end the investor comes back to its money, be it the private equity investor or the debt provider. And at the end, it's the poor consumers. Usually, the poor consumers have to pay. They pay social tariffs. And again, this means we get low revenues. And our expectation is that in many, many cases, without subsidies, investments aren't really financially viable. I'm very happy that there are other examples and really have to dwell on that. Uganda is slightly different, and I won't go into the details. We're very happy that also there's some money from the EU being in this project involved. And what I think really was the experience in this specific case was that about three-fourths of the whole consumption is for productive use. And this gives me room for really emphasizing the need for productive use, simply just to encourage people to produce more efficiently, but at the end, of course, we want them to produce, consume more. And yet, in order to have real economic development, I think there's real need for productive use. The challenge in this northwestern region of Uganda were, and I think also you with the private companies, you know there's a lot more in details than I do at the moment, is the contract negotiations with the companies, be it the PPA or be it just private public partnership contracts. That's easy said above here, but in a local context there are a lot of things I think you have to take into account. And at the end, I think we have to be very cautious when we do projects and which consist of a generation part and the network part. We really have to be cautious to do a right timing. Otherwise, if the network is there but there's no generation, it can become very costly if you have to get back for diesel, at least if it for 2 years or so. This already leads me to the conclusions. I think, well, we all agree that it's very good that the UN initiative has brought back energy access on the political agenda. I think when it comes to this kind of definition and how do we find which methodology do we use in order to come up with concrete numbers, which are then also proposed to the politicians and which are news, there's still some need for discussing. And KfW, together with our German colleagues from the GIZ, we are very happy to organize a workshop to this end in early 2015, and we were happy to invite most of you to join. The challenges, and this will be my last words, we heard it before, low tariffs, low demand, that's kind of natural. The point is we do need smart subsidies. No matter if it's a private company or the electric public utility, at the end someone has to pay for the higher cost. And it's rather unlikely that the poor, densely population will be able to cover it in most cases. And therefore, I would like to conclude again with this hint of let's try and ask in the community to think of productive use in order to bring really a development to the communities we're working with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drillish. Of course, a banker brings bankers' problems to the table. There is no surprise into that. The European Union is heavily financing KfW, Agence Française, EIB to make projects happening. Because the bankers, they say to us, you know, in order for a project to happen, we need technical assistance. And that's the purpose of the financing facilities. I'm chairing one of them, the one for Africa. And I can tell you that the business is all about grant money put at use of loans in order for making more loans, more investments, transforming a marginally unviable investment into a marginally viable one, and that is called additionality, without which our money to Agence Française, KfW, EIB, and the other partners will not be. But traditionally, these are big projects. Today, we are moving into a smaller scale blending, where problems, as enucleated by the professor earlier on, are even more, how can I say, more difficult to solve. I think that we are all cautious. He has been repeating 3 or 4 times the word cautious. We are very, very cautious. The fact of the matter is that people are without energy. And we have experienced that by giving energy, by providing access to electricity, a lot of things happen. In the private sector, you rightly spotted out that this is a central aspect. Development of private sector activities, development of small artisanal activities, development of small little activities at agricultural transformation level, that makes a whole big difference in the village life. And that big difference will then empower to pay tariffs. And the payment of tariffs will allow the operator to extend the network. And that extension of the network will get more people into small businesses, and this will evolve in a positive spiral. This is the working assumption, I think, that is bringing all of us here. Thank you. These are extremely exciting contributions. Now, I have received from my colleagues, and I would like to thank them, the notes that they have taken out of your interventions. There is a lot. I don't want to repeat, frankly. We have about more than 15 minutes to go into questions to the panelists, and I hope that questions can be as naughty and as interesting as possible. So, who's the one that is willing to break the ice and shoot the first question? Okay. We have, I would like to ask now the colleagues and friends to take track of the different hands, and we certainly start from this gentleman here on the 4th row, the lady on the 3rd row, and the other gentleman. Then we continue with 1, 2, and 3. We have 6. I have 6 on my book. Try to remember them. 7. We start with a bunch of 5, and then we take a second batch. I ask you to be very strict to the point so that the question can receive the quickest answer. Can I have microphone here? Microphones are coming. Yes. One microphone here to this gentleman in the center. Okay, you start, sir, please.
Yes, good morning, dear colleagues. My name is Pepin Chouate. I'm an energy consultant. I have listened to the panelists. I have barely one question. Energy access is really on the political agenda since a couple of years. The last presenter has spoken about the productive uses, but there is a big issue, sometimes conflicting issue between what we want to achieve with the energy access, especially access to electricity, and the development objectives of government, who really wants to develop the electricity sector with the grid-connected project, which might not achieve a greater access to electricity, but will improve the development of the country and development of income-generating activities. Energy efficiency is one of, improvement of grid efficiency is one of these, and sometimes it's really conflicting. I think we should go deeper into detail on that issue and maybe discuss more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One question, please take note, then I will ask you who wants to take it up. Sir, and then the lady there. Can you give the micro to this lady on the third, please?
My name is William Ilbouda. I'm from Burkina Faso, and I'm leading a company called Isomed since 16 years. My question, it's really interesting that he talked before me, because it's a kind of similar question. Today we are talking about empowering rural electrification. It's always a little bit, I have a mixed feeling about the word electrification. In my opinion, the objective of what we are doing is to develop the country. And if we want to develop the country, we want to try to make value added in production we have. And the production we have is transformed by using heat, mostly, through cooking, drying, all those activities for food processing, but not electricity. Electricity is only perhaps 15 or 20%. Why are we focusing on electricity in that case?
Thank you. The lady, thanks. Can you pass on the micro just behind you? Yes, please.
My name is Faustina Boache. I'm the chair of the Ghana Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves and also of the Gender and Energy Network Ghana. I have heard everybody talk about electricity, and then I see one line on improved cook stoves. Meanwhile, it's supposed to be part of the big agenda. And so, in Ghana, the Ghana Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves is also supporting the Ghana government objective of encouraging the adoption of 50% of the population adopting the use of LPG gas, but I have also not heard much about that. But when I read the document too, I saw something about adoption of LPG gas in countries. So what is it? What are you saying about that? Thank you.
Thank you. I had her, the gentleman behind you. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Gosai from Ethiopia. My question maybe goes to all the presenters. When we see these mini grids, can we consider as a long-term solution without considering the grid-based, the interface with the grid? Because we have the experience, and we are doing both. The off-grid and the grid. When you consider the demand grows in the future, can you see these mini-grids as a long-term solution? Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask the fifth, yes, and then we take the second round.
Je suis Todé Mahassan de l'Agence béninoise d'électrification rurale et de maîtrise d'énergie. Lorsqu'on parle de l'utilisation productive de l'électricité, je pense qu'il faudrait tenir compte également de la suite des produits transformés. Nous ne devrions pas simplement nous arrêter à l'utilisation de l'électricité, mais nous devons également avancer vers les produits qui ont été transformés. Donc, parler d'une approche intégrée de l'accès à l'utilisation pour la production des produits agricoles, comme vous l'aviez demandé. Aller vers la commercialisation également des produits qui ont été transformés. Merci.
Merci. I would ask the panelists to take. We have 5 questions. What do we want to achieve with this rural electrification, indeed? And why only electrification and not improved cooking stoves and other technologies? Then the big question of how to see the long-term solution, perhaps for the utilities, how to integrate these mini-grids later on when the main grids will bring a cheaper source of electricity. And last but not least, why not looking at integration of electricity, which helps to transform, but then we need to help to commercialize and marketing the product. Who wants to start? Professor, you, and then Susan from Aeroelectrics, and our friend from AFT.
Okay.
Quick to the point, sir.
I hope it works. Yeah, it does. Okay, thank you for the question. At first, I would like to answer about electricity, whether this is the solution for everything or not. Yeah? Certainly, electricity is not the solution for everything, but if we look at the history of the developed countries, we see that with the beginning of the last century, when energy became available in a bigger size by electricity, by diesel gensets, and by motors for cars, a new kind of development began. Yes, so certainly for rural areas, as we also see for already industrialized areas in developing countries, electricity is not the solution, but an important requirement for further development. And if we look, for example, at the effectivity and efficiency of production, whether it's wood processing or whether it's pumping water or having light at night to have a shop, then we see how much can be done additionally and more effective just by electrification. But of course, this is not the solution at the end. What is needed as well, and Mr. Drillish pointed this out additionally, is productive use, to have people trained and supported to become entrepreneurs, to start a business, to create jobs, to have income, profits, pay taxes, and to get a wheel in movement, which leads to further development.
Thank you. Suzanne from Aeroelectric.
First of all, really very good questions, and I think they align in many senses. Yeah, the first question was about what if the government has a different political agenda in a way from what we are talking about, this rural electrification. And I would say, yes, this is very much a question, and we really need to avoid, and this is the big risk even here in Europe, yeah, that we are implementing the solutions of the past. And I would like to be very clear that Eurelectric is definitely not standing for wiring up entire countries, as that's the history of our region, where this was the only solution. Today we have different technological solutions, this microgrid question. And I strongly believe in the future there will be a coexistence of some kind of centralized generation in big urban areas, as well as microgrid solution as the most cost-efficient ones in decentralized areas. Yeah? And then this question of electricity is the solution, different from you. Yes, I believe electricity is the solution, and not because you only use it, I don't know what, for light or something. Electricity can be well used for cooking, for transport, for many other things with the energy system of the future. And here in these presentations, there was various times mentioned PV plus diesel. And this is a bit a strange mix. You take the stuff from the past. Diesel is the most decentralized generation you can imagine. Even in Belgium today, with the upcoming winter, we are thinking about having some diesel generators in the houses. Yeah? Why couldn't we think about PV plus e-vehicles, e-buses, and then integrate even beyond electricity transport, which is an important issue in your countries and the developing countries within this electricity system. So I strongly believe, yes, that's the right question, electrification in these countries, but the semantics you put on electricity must be completely different from what we understand today with using electricity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kennis from Siemens.
I want, just on the two questions, I try to make one answer on the first one, and on the question number 4. First of all, I think it's very logical, without making a statement on policies, etc., that governments focus on the big infrastructure projects for rural electrification. I think this is the only one who can do this. Investments of 10, 20 millions of these big projects, I think this is a role for the government. And we see this also in Europe, but even more in developing countries. And I think this is also the claim and what we wanted to put forward, that the role for the development of these smaller projects, this is a speed and a pace that only local entrepreneurs can do. This is not possible by governments focusing on big rural problems, urban problems, etc., challenges and development of millions of people, they will never be able to follow the pace necessary for the development of these smaller projects. And it's not a waste of money. This is the question on the techniques, because this is one of the domains where we can say first of all, technically, it's possible to connect the grids if they are well managed. It's a technical solution for this. But even then, as mentioned before, it will not be probably a question of on the first hand, the microgrid or mini-grid waiting until the cable comes. I also see that the business case, if we just talk about economics, it's sometimes much more expensive to make 50 kilometers of lines and substations and all these millions of investments if there is a solution on the long term available to make electricity on a reasonable, affordable tariff.
Thank you. Monsieur de Groma?
Yes, 3 quick answers. On clean stove, clean cooking stove, I would say that's another subject. You've got rural electrification, and it's really, so it's a very important subject, but let's do another seminar on this with the forestry people, with other people. But don't mix, we can't mix clean cooking. I don't think that the African will go to electric cooking, so that's another subject. But it's a really clear, a very big, important subject also. The second thing is why electrification? I would say because there is a real demand on this. There is a real demand. The people pay 10 to 20 times more the fact that they don't have electricity, and they are ready to pay for this. So clearly there is a demand, and the fact is that when I hear this question, it's always in a room with a lot of lighting, with a lot of electricity, and if there were no electricity here, we would not be here. And I would say there is the same willingness in a village. If you spend a few days in a village without electricity, you really want electricity. So that's the second point. And the third point is always this objection between productive and non-productive use, which is same thing, a true question, but sometimes a false problem. The major use of electricity for rural electrification is for lighting, communication, TV. It's where the electricity has the best value added on this. On engines, the people has not waited for us to get some diesel and to some projects. So there is a clear demand on this. And it's, when you look, for instance, there is a good history also in China. In China, they had put a lot of grid at that time, and no one was connected to the grid. And when did the Chinese connected to the grid? It's when the TV appeared, because they could not get the TV without electricity. And that's the same today. If you have no electricity, you can get now some portable, but you can't get the whole facility. So there are clearly some close link, and the business has to be done on both non-productive and productive use.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask you to hold your horses? We have another tour, and then you answer to the first and the question and the second tour, because I needed to listen from the floor. That lady there was at the very beginning on the second row, and the other lady in green. I'm sorry, I'm going to have a preference for ladies, and then I have to take from this other side. I think we have this gentleman here, these 3 in the front rows, and that lady there. So let's go. But if you go fast, then we can really address everything.
Okay, I will be. ABSE, UNESDR, energy focal point. Just as a contribution, indeed, education is key, because if we don't have any education, it's difficult to, for capacity building is very important. I'm an engineer myself. I specialize in solar, and in the countryside, I'm training people to build up street lighting, solar water heaters, and home systems. Education is key. And for the sister from rural electrification who was saying that it's difficult to bring the people from the city to the countryside, I said you should use the countryside people to the countryside and not the other way around. Okay? And also, Mr. Rudolphi, you said something very important this morning. Somebody who knows the community. That's very important. I'm a princess from the countryside, and of course, local authorities is very important, but they rely on local and traditional authorities, and we would like to be involved because we can really reach the people. Actually, I'm working with more than 21 million households connection through our network, but we would really like to get involved in that. And for Siemens, research and development is very important. So the sun is not shining at night, of course. Then we need to think on research and development to store the energy. Then I invite you to invest in batteries because we didn't invest enough money on how to store the energy. So, and also for the financial side, of course, what we need, we lack insurance. Insurance missing. Within your proposal, I would like to have insurance there, and also some financial tools who can allow the private sector to have a kind of factoring. So I can discuss it later with your colleagues. Thank you.
The lady, yes, please.
I'm Sabina Noche Mensah, CEO of Anomina Ventures and a member of the Gender and Energy Network Ghana. I'm just sharing some experiences working at the rural level. I haven't heard so far about sensitization. You know, we have those at the policy level and then those at the rural level, mostly women. They can be literate or illiterate, but if you apply the right sensitization programs, including adult literacy education, it helps for them to get involved. And then they need this electricity to do their work when it comes to productive uses. And therefore, I think there should be a special target towards this particular group of people. And I'll even suggest the formation of Rural Women Technician Corps to educate these women to handle simple tools. And then lastly, I would love if there's a linkage, as I said earlier, between the policy level and those at the grassroots. And then, as my sister said, involve people who are working already at the local level so that we can bring in those who actually need the electricity to do their work. It will go to benefit both men, women, boys, and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have to pass on this side. 1, 2, 3, and 4, please. Yes, yes, yes. You start from there. Yes.
Merci beaucoup. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo. La République démocratique du Congo est un vaste pays qui a plus de 2,5 millions, presque 2,3 millions km². 75 millions d'habitants. Et le pays est électrifié seulement à moins de 10%. Maintenant, nous sommes heureux d'avoir été à cette conférence où Electrify compte travailler avec des privés. Un pays aussi large que la République démocratique du Congo, presque 80 000 villages. Je me demande comment cette République démocratique du Congo va être électrifiée d'ici 2030 à au moins 50%, puisque l'objectif c'est 100%, en se basant sur les privés, et comment le faire avec les privés. À mon avis, je pense qu'on a besoin d'une assistance technique qui doit être sur le terrain, en vue d'étudier les réformes nécessaires pour pouvoir électrifier le pays. Et comment électrifier le pays? Avec des privés simplement, ou avec des organisations comme des coopératives d'électricité rurale? Et comment organiser ces coopératives d'électricité rurale? Et comment les fonds vont arriver à ces coopératives afin de créer, par exemple, un projet pilote. Et ce projet pilote qui va servir d'exemple à tout le pays. Merci.
Merci. Cet monsieur ici, cet monsieur, s'il vous plaît. Oui.
Oui, bonjour, je suis Khalid Benamou, le directeur du projet Sahara Wind. J'ai une question pour la personne de Siemens. En principe, vous avez dit que vous aimez de gros projets, puisque c'est votre technologie, votre structure. Vous êtes entouré de gros bailleurs de fonds qui aiment aussi ce genre d'approche. Et on sait que la solution à l'accès à l'électrification rurale passe par un bottom-up process, par de l'entrepreneuriat local. Alors, est-ce que vous pensez que vos solutions, votre structure, à vous trois finalement, est adaptée à ce type de challenge? Et la seconde question, elle est liée à la gouvernance. On va introduire de grosses opportunités d'affaires dans des pays dans lesquels, en fait, ce sont des structures top-down. Vous travaillez en structure top-down. Et bon, c'est clair que la gouvernance locale ne va pas vous laisser introduire des idées pour encourager des entrepreneurs à concurrencer finalement un monopole de gouvernance. Merci.
Merci. Je prends encore 4 intervenants. Madame, cet monsieur ici et la dame arrière, ça fait 3. On commence par Madame avec les jaunes. Oui.
Okay.
Je prends 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm Grace Mukasa, Practical Action in East Africa. As I listened this morning, there are 2 questions I'm asking. How do we ensure that the development of electricity really enhances the business capacities of the small and medium enterprises in terms of financing, in terms of business, and also technical development? Because this is a sector which is not very active on the ground. We've always linked electricity to government. The other one is, how do we ensure that the pendulum doesn't shift so much on business and leaves out the important role of civil society? Awareness building, supporting community uptake of new technologies, but also continuous advocacy so that the development we get really benefits people who are poor and marginalized.
Thank you. This gentleman, and the lady.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question is to go to Molly, U.S. Department. And you have made biogas project in our neighboring country, Bangladesh. Sorry, I'm Tonai Aung, Kaunjoji Engineering Company Limited in Myanmar. We are sacrificed in the renewable energy, and also I'm chairman of the Energy and Environmental Group, which is one of the non-government organizations, Myanmar Industry Association. And we found out that you have 36,000 biogas plant already done in Bangladesh. According to our knowledge that this is very challenging, I wonder if you could answer how many of your projects is still sustainable and running at this moment. And second question is if you found out the failed project, what would you deal with these projects to be renewed again? And then my second question to the financing department. Our country is changing to the democratization. Our government like to lead the country economic from the private sector. So my question is, if you still need government supporting to your financing project, it will be not the direct way. So our government also like to give us a way to make a private sector leading this role. So you can deal with us directly. So the financing, I would like to mention is that can you deal with us directly to our government, to the private sector without government support?
Thank you. Gentlemen?
My name is Moussa Doumbia from Mali. Sorry, my English is not very strong.
Go with French.
I have 2 questions. address I want to address to AFD and KFW. The question of rural electrification, I'm in this business more than 10 years now. But the really problem in Africa is financing. So technology, there is no problem. Political intention, there is no problem. But the true problem of rural electrification is financing. So local African entrepreneurs will lack working capital. And our customers, they lack also the money to buy the system. So I want to address a question to IFD and KFD. Why you don't work directly with private entrepreneurs? Because working through government institution is not very easy for us. And I want to ask if in the future scheme may intend to work directly with private entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Last question.
I'll make it very short. My name is Ina Hoxa, and I work at Vestas. We're also working on rural electrification in northern Kenya as a pilot. And my question, which is sort of related to that, is how do we make sure, especially the sort of KFWFD and I guess USAID, to have smart grants? And by that I mean, how do you make sure that you're actually financing good business models? I mean, because right now it just seems like we're letting 1,000 flowers bloom, and that's a great idea, that's not a bad idea, but how do we create metrics, and I guess it's also for DG, that actually in some ways make it easier to find what are good solutions, and that way I think we'll have a better hope of making them scalable. So what metrics are you thinking of evaluating some of these solutions?
Thank you. Before I give the word, first of all, to the three speakers that didn't speak before, I want to apologize with all of you that couldn't speak now, but I can see from the last 3-4 questions that you are actually anticipating what we will discuss after lunch. Because, sir, we are exactly here to find a good way for public partners, team up with the financial partners, knowing the business model that you are looking at in order to provide better, more direct finance, if possible. There is public finance linked to a number of projects. There is finance that can go to private in order to develop privately certain schemes, and there is a mix of the two. So afternoon, 2:30, we are a little bit late, but you have to catch up in eating a little bit faster. We will see at 2:30 the presentation of the model which is behind Electrify. So a number of questions that you have now on the tip of your tongue, I hope will be answered later on. Just to reassure you that SMEs benefits are indeed part of this, what we are saying. The civic society is considered very importantly. We don't risk to under-consider that. Reforms into the regulatory environment are essential, and we do have a technical assistance facilities. In fact, a number of experts that are financed by us are in the room today to follow that. And for us, it's extremely important to look at the practicalities of how to devolve this finance that we want to increase. But let me ask now the very final round. We have only 2-3 minutes. Ms. Ward, please, up to you first. I start from those that didn't speak before, Professor. You be calm, eh?
Is it working? Yes, okay. I will race through a couple of these, just a few comments on some of the questions. Going back to the first set of questions, there was one about including cook stoves, and this is something that we are looking at. I think it's important to look at electrification as well as cook stoves, but when you're developing a model, sometimes it makes more sense to focus on one particular area and then to bring the other area in. If you kind of throw in, you know, the entire kitchen sink, everything with the kitchen sink at the beginning, it's a little bit too much. So for example, in the case of ITCAL, you know, it started off as infrastructure only, then it moved to a program that included renewable energy infrastructure, and then that was initially just solar home systems. Then it grew from solar home systems to include biogas, clean cooking fuels, mini grid systems. There was another question about mini-grids as a long-term solution. I definitely think that mini-grids could be a long-term solution. I think that there are areas that are so remote that they might not ever be connected to the grid, or it will be a very, very long time before they do. So I really think in especially areas like that, mini-grid systems absolutely make sense. In areas where the grid will eventually reach, I mean, you don't know actually when that will happen. So you can set a target or a goal, but you don't really know. And so I think that it is important to set up some sort of structure to provide electricity for these off-grid areas. I think that you can also structure mini-grids in a way that they could start off smaller, so it could be a pico system that only connects a few households, and then it could grow to a nano size, to a micro size, to a mini size. So you can create flexibility within the mini-grid systems to allow growth over time as villages grow. And hopefully you could structure them in a way so that they could be developed, could be connected to the grid later on if the grid does reach those particular villages. Another question was about how you know whether models can enhance small and medium enterprises. I think that this is a really good question. I think that you need to, first of all, be able to measure the individual success. So, you know, how do you know if a model is enhancing them? Well, you have to be able to set some sort of parameter that allows you to measure it and to determine whether it's successful. But also, one I think method of this measurement is to see whether or not a company or organization is able to move beyond basic subsidies or donor finance. I think it's fine to have that, and it's important to have that initially to get a company off the ground and to allow it to grow and scale up and gain that track record. But I think over time, a good measure is to see whether or not a company is able to move beyond that basic donor financing. And then the final question that was directed specifically to Bangladesh, we should probably talk about that afterward, because since I don't work specifically for IDCOL, I can't speak to their projects. I was merely using IDCOL as an example that's allowed us in our SE for All country action to become successful in our country plans. IDCOL has a number of projects that have been quite successful, and I can't really speak to the ones that they have in the hopper right now, but in terms of what we're doing for the SE for All initiative is we are putting together an investor forum, which will be October 29th and 30th, and this will have a subset of projects that are not specific to IDCOL. IDCOL will actually be presenting one of the projects among a number of other projects at this forum.
Thank you. Ms. Neelan?
Yes, I just want to react on some remarks regarding operational issues. The lady in orange, you said about education is key and that we should recruit people from the countryside. We are doing that. We're only doing that because there are people who can do that and have a good education level. But sometimes we have problems with finding on top management level, on finding the right people. So then we look into the urban areas in the cities. But a lot of trainings are given on all levels, marketing, customer relations, technical, financial level, management level. So we are organizing every year at all our companies all kind of training sessions with NGOs in the areas and also training bureaus in the country itself. So they don't come from Europe. The last one is more and more women are becoming technicians at our companies, and in fact they are even doing better sometimes than men. They are more precise sometimes. And the last one, LPG gas. No. The gas, there was, I think, one of the ladies from Ghana. LPG gas, we have adopted it in South Africa 10 years ago for cooking. And since then, the competition has taken it over. We have a lot of competition, and we decided to withdraw because now there's enough supply of LPG gas in KwaZulu-Natal where we are operating. And that could be indeed something we could do also in other countries.
Thank you. Mr. Dish, very quickly, the lunch is awaiting for us.
won't let it get cold. Well, thanks for this interesting question. Maybe just one word. Does working with the private sector means also working with the banking system? I think the banking system in all of the countries, be it our countries, be it countries in Africa and Asia, is very essential also for our task in energy access. Maybe the division of labor within the German system of development cooperation foresees that there is a part of the KfW banking group which is called Deutsche Entwicklungsgesellschaft, the DEG, the German Development Corporation. They are entitled to work directly with the private sector. So this refers to Myanmar, for example, and also for countries like Mali and other countries. Due to the division of labor, we are just predominantly working with the public sector, but we can also discuss details later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Wagner.
Yes, I would like to refer to the question here, does electricity only support the commercial entities, or is it also of profit for the population? Yeah? I would like to remember one slide which I showed with 3 activity packages. To have mini-grids, technically, yeah? To have a second package for education and capacity training, and to have, last but not least, entrepreneurship to be supported. What is a training and education process as well? Education, everything. Okay, so when people are more educated, when more entrepreneurship are active, more jobs are available, then of course incomes of companies may rise, taxes can be paid, money is available for a lot of things. Now the question of the people living there. When effectivity and efficiency rises, yeah, when the income rises of factory, then of course salaries can rise too, but not automatically. Of course, people have to stand up and to ask for higher salaries. This is a question of association, trade unions, etc. But altogether with such a movement, it is possible to go in that direction, to have higher profits and higher salaries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to close the session. If there are residual answers, the panelists will address those, and you will address the panelists. Now, I want to state that it has been a very, very lively morning. We had the political statements. We have set the scene. We got a lot of experience accumulated here. We heard a number of question marks. We hope that all these question marks will become practical comments and improvements to the proposal that you will be hearing at 2:40. So we are late 20 minutes. I give you 10 back, which is at 2:40, everybody here in the room for the discussion on Electrify proposal. Now, a big round of applause to our panel.